He is probably France's most laid-back retired driver, spending every day sitting on a boat with an old friend, slowly fishing and chatting. After spending an entire day to finally catch a single fish, it ends up as his meal on the table. Just as he is dazing off and about to get up to turn off the TV, he suddenly senses an unusual movement. A black sedan unexpectedly smashes through the wall of his house and crashes right into his living room. If he had gotten up even a second later, he would have been crushed to pieces by the vehicle. Out of professional habit, he first calls an ambulance before checking on the driver's condition. At this moment, the driver is covered in blood, and his situation looks dire. This man named Frank pulls a passport out of the driver's pocket. Looking at the name on the passport, he realizes that this driver is actually someone he knows. It turns out this unconscious driver is just like Frank, a specialized driver who handles private delivery jobs. A job had previously reached out to Frank, but since he was retired, he turned down the offer and recommended another colleague to the client. He turns to leave, but he is suddenly surrounded by a group of goons. It turns out the employer only has eyes for him, and this job is absolutely mandatory for him. It seems these people didn't do their homework before coming for Frank, because besides his driving skills, he also knows a thing or two about hand-to-hand combat. Frank starts throwing hands without a single word, and his favorite thing is standing in the middle of a crowd to take them all on at once. The way he fights while wearing a business suit is simply a breathtaking sight to behold. Frank effortlessly takes down the clients who tried to force him into the job. But since the other party had no choice, they eventually sought out Malcolm, the driver he recommended. However, Frank truly never expected things to turn out like this. He tries to pull Malcolm out of the car for medical aid, but the man is incoherent, repeatedly muttering that he cannot go outside. Frank assumes Malcolm just bumped his head and is dazed. He also notices that Malcolm is wearing a strange iron bracelet on his wrist that is flashing with a blue light. At that moment, the ambulance arrives, and the paramedics waste no time loading the injured Malcolm onto the vehicle. Frank returns to the house to continue inspecting the damaged car. He opens the rear door, and only then does he discover a girl lying in the back who was also knocked unconscious by the crash. Frank waits for the girl to wake up and tries to take her away from the sedan, but she is terrified of leaving. It turns out she is also wearing an iron bracelet on her arm. Informed by the girl, Frank finally learns that anyone wearing the bracelet is forbidden from leaving the car. He immediately thinks of Malcolm, who was just sent away in the ambulance. Sensing something is wrong, he quickly runs out, trying to get the ambulance to stop. The ambulance explodes right before his eyes. A frustrated Frank returns to the girl. Just as he is about to speak, someone appears behind him and knocks him unconscious with a single punch. When Frank wakes up again, he finds himself stripped of his clothes and lying in an empty room. He rubs the back of his head, which is still throbbing with pain, and then he discovers that he is now wearing one of those strange iron bracelets on his own wrist. There is a wardrobe in the corner of the room. As soon as Frank puts on his signature black suit that he always wears for work, a group of people walks into the room. It turns out to be the same crew that tried to hire Frank before, only this time, their boss has personally shown up. Not only does Johnson look sinister, but his methods are also incredibly ruthless. Because one of his henchmen dared to interrupt, Johnson impatiently unalives him with a single shot. Johnson then points the gun at Frank, pressuring him once again to take the job. Frank isn't a fool, so he swallows his pride for the moment and reluctantly agrees.
Drive my own car.
When Frank works, he must drive his custom Audi A8 W12. This car is equipped with a 6.0-liter W12 engine, producing a maximum power of 331 kilowatts and accelerating from 0 to 100 in just 5.2 seconds. Having already investigated Frank thoroughly, Johnson has already brought his beloved car over. Not only did they remove all the weapons and ammunition from his car, but they also installed a GPS navigator to ensure Frank follows their predetermined route. As for what the cargo is, a professional like Frank never asks questions. However, he notices that the girl from Malcolm's car last night is also sitting inside the vehicle. Before setting off, a frustrated Frank asks about the purpose of the iron bracelet on his wrist. It turns out the device is filled with liquid explosives, and if he moves more than 25 feet away from the car, it will glow yellow. At 50 feet, it turns orange, and once it exceeds 75 feet, the light turns red, and it detonates instantly, leaving the wearer with nothing left. Frank is filled with rage, but he is helpless and can only start the mission for now. He hits the road in his Audi. Not long after starting from the initial location, he slams the steering wheel in frustration as his anger boils over. Only then does he remember the girl sitting next to him, so he proactively tries to strike up a conversation. But Valentina gives him the cold shoulder, refusing to even tell him her name. Seeing Valentina's cold attitude, Frank decides not to make a fool of himself any further. He spots a fork in the road and drives right onto it, deviating from the set path. It turns out he is going to find an old friend for some help. Meanwhile, Johnson sees on the monitor that Frank isn't following the rules, so he immediately dispatches men to help him get back on track. Frank drives to a secret garage, which is the base of operations for his engineer friend, Otto. He wants Otto to see if there is any way to remove the iron contraption from his wrist. As a hacker, Otto's eyes light up the moment he sees the bracelet, recognizing it instantly as a new type of weapon developed by the Pentagon. Otto decides to help Frank search the Audi's body to see where the bracelet's transmitter is hidden. But Valentina, sitting in the car, warns him absolutely not to do that. Just as she finishes speaking, the group of thugs sent by Johnson arrives. These people are here to force Frank back onto the correct path. It seems another fierce battle is unavoidable. A kid who looks like he has some decent moves rushes up, only to be kicked over by Frank. It seems that if they want to take Frank down, they'll have to swarm him all at once. Frank begins another solo performance of one man versus a crowd. Meanwhile, Valentina watches with great interest from the car, realizing the driver she looked down upon is actually this capable, and she instantly develops feelings for him. The hard-fighting Frank, however, has no idea that a girl is currently crushing on him. He drops the steel pipe while panting, thinking the battle is over. But unexpectedly, a giant nearly 2 meters tall walks in immediately after. Frank is sent flying by a single punch from the behemoth. No matter how hard he strikes the giant, the big guy doesn't budge, while Frank is effortlessly tossed aside again. Realizing he doesn't have the upper hand, Frank keeps dodging and intentionally lures the giant into the maintenance area. The giant delivers a powerful kick, but gets his lower body stuck in the repair pit, unable to move. Frank then pummels the man's face, landing over a dozen heavy blows before grabbing a shovel to finally knock him out. Frank even romantically tosses a rose at him. By the time Frank returns, Otto has found the location of the transmitter. However, it is connected to the bomb's wiring, and if it is cut, it will explode instantly. Frank has no other choice but to change into a new suit and get back on the road for now. Afterwards, Frank calls Johnson again to contact him. He finds a reason, insisting that they must meet in person to clear some things up. Actually, Frank is hoping to find the key to unlock the bracelet on Johnson's person. Johnson agrees to meet him an hour later at the first stage destination, Bucharest. He drives all the way to Bucharest, the capital of Romania, following the GPS to a farmer's market. Valentina is fast asleep in the back seat. While Frank is waiting for Johnson's call, a public phone next to the car suddenly begins to ring. This sudden ringing catches Frank's attention, so he immediately steps out of the car and walks to the phone booth to pick it up. As expected, it is Johnson on the other end. Before Frank can even try to trick Johnson into meeting him, Johnson says he no longer wishes to cooperate and is firing him, telling him to get lost immediately. Right after that, a total stranger suddenly jumps into the Audi behind him. Frank quickly chases after it, but he is a step too late. He must catch up with the car. Otherwise, once the distance reaches 75 feet, he will be instantly blown to pieces. Frank starts a life-or-death sprint through the farmer's market. Seeing the car driving further and further away, he quickly seizes a bicycle and pedals like a madman. At this time, Valentina, who was sleeping in the car, is jolted awake by the movement. Seeing a different driver and Frank chasing frantically behind, she panics and starts pulling at the stranger, trying to make him stop. As Frank chases from behind, his bracelet has already turned yellow, and if it turns red, he is finished. He takes a shortcut, charging directly into an office building. He makes a leap, flying over the workers' desks and sprinting through a chorus of screams. With one final flying kick, he bursts out of the building and knocks the stranger heavily out of the car, reclaiming his driver's seat. Since the car is back in Frank's hands, Johnson has no choice but to shake hands and make peace again, allowing the delivery deal to continue. After all, in Johnson's eyes, Frank still can't pull off any miracles as long as the bracelet hasn't been removed. Immediately after, he gives Frank new coordinates for the delivery. On the way to the next destination, a Mercedes suddenly starts chasing them from behind. The two cars engage in a high-speed pursuit on the main road. In the midst of the chaos, Frank calls Johnson again and confirms that the car behind is not sent by him. It seems there is another group of people eyeing the cargo in Frank's car. With no other option, Frank has to find a way to shake off the pursuers on his own. Just then, on the road ahead, two heavy-duty trucks are driving side by side, blocking the way. Frank doesn't slow down and charges straight ahead. Using his superb driving skills, he actually makes the Audi tilt on its side, sliding perfectly through the narrow gap between the two trucks. The Mercedes behind doesn't have that kind of skill and is forced to stay behind the trucks. Frank passes through the trucks on two wheels, which so terrifies the truck drivers that they swerve and block the road completely. The Mercedes is forced to drive through the weeds to continue its pursuit of Frank. Seeing that the pursuers are relentless and even using machine guns to fire at him, Frank finally loses his temper. He stops running and, timing it perfectly, slams on the brakes to bring the car to a sudden halt. The gunman in the car behind is caught off guard and doesn't have time to get back inside, resulting in his arm being snapped by the impact. Seeing the enemies have moved in front of him, Frank floors the gas and pushes forward with all his might, shoving the Mercedes right off the cliff. Frank gives a contemptuous glance at the car burning at the bottom of the ravine. Since there hasn't been a moment of peace all day with constant battles, Frank finally feels exhausted. He parks the car on a hillside to catch his breath and calm his nerves. At this moment, a hand gently strokes his neck. Valentina actually wants to share a passionate moment with Frank, but he is in no mood for that right now. He opens the trunk, finally unable to resist breaking his rule of never asking about the cargo. He just wants to see what kind of goods would cause so many people to fight over them, and even lead to the death of his colleague. However, when he opens the cargo bag in the trunk, he finds only an atlas used as filler. Only then does he realize he has been played, and there is no cargo at all. But a thought suddenly strikes him as he looks at Valentina. Could it be that this woman Johnson arranged to travel with him is the actual cargo? To his surprise, Valentina actually admits it. Frank's anger flares up, and at this moment, he has a lot of pent-up fire that needs a release. And it just so happens that Valentina is still swaying her beautiful body in front of him. Thus, a passionate encounter between the two occurs right there on the great lawn. Meanwhile, Johnson, who has been remotely monitoring the progress, notices the Audi has deviated from the path again, and the signal is lost. He repeatedly calls Frank's phone, but Frank is currently too occupied to answer. Johnson is so furious he wants to unalive Frank right then and there. At sunset, Valentina leans into Frank's arms and finally tells him her name and the truth behind everything. Valentina is the daughter of Vasilev, the Ukrainian Minister of the Environment. This is because the black-hearted businessmen on Johnson's side have brought several ships of toxic industrial waste to a Ukrainian port. They want Minister Vasilev to sign an illegal agreement to allow them to dump the waste in Ukraine, but Vasilev refused to sign. So Johnson and his crew kidnapped Valentina and had the experienced Frank drive her around Europe until Minister Vasilev is forced to sign. After learning the truth, Frank decides to help Valentina escape from their clutches. He calls his police inspector friend Tarconi and asks for a favor. Frank then continues to take Valentina back to the mainland. Johnson's phone calls again, giving Frank the final address, stating that once Valentina is delivered there, his job will be completely over. Frank knows the final moment has arrived. He drives the car onto a designated bridge, only to find both ends blocked by several cars. Multiple gunmen are aiming their weapons at his Audi. Johnson tells Frank to let Valentina out. Valentina doesn't want to go, knowing that once she leaves, Johnson's men will immediately open fire on Frank. But Frank tells her not to worry, as he already has a plan. So Valentina says a reluctant goodbye to her lover and walks toward Johnson. Johnson unlocks Valentina's iron bracelet and then gives the order for his men to fire. Immediately, gunfire erupts as gunmen from both flanks shoot at the Audi in the middle. Frank knew this would happen, so he slams the gas and crashes through the railing, plunging into the river. The people on the bridge continue to fire until the car is completely submerged in the water. Frank must save himself while inside the car. He cannot simply swim to the surface because moving away from the car would trigger the explosion. He swims to the trunk and takes out 2 rubber bags he had prepared earlier. He uses the air from the car tires to quickly inflate the bags while also replenishing his own oxygen. Just like that, the 2 bags filled with air bring the Audi back to the surface quickly. By the time Tarconi arrives, Frank is leisurely sitting on the roof of the car, waiting for a tractor to slowly pull his Audi ashore. Despite being a waterlogged car, it can still be driven after Frank tunes it up. He needs to hurry and drive it to save the woman he loves. At this time, Valentina has been taken by Johnson's group onto a moving train. Johnson is waiting for the final signed agreement from his men and Minister Vasilev. Although Minister Vasilev knows his daughter is in the hands of the villains, he keeps delaying the signature, seemingly waiting for a certain result. Valentina sits on the train in tears, not out of fear for her own safety, but out of sadness for Frank. But suddenly she looks out the window and smiles. It turns out Frank has caught up in his Audi. He drives the car onto the road above the train tunnel. Watching the train approaching, Frank times it perfectly, hits the gas, and jumps off the bridge, landing the car steadily on top of the train. Like a god descending from the heavens, he kicks through the glass and bursts into the train car. Enemies from both sides fire wildly at his position, forcing Frank to stay down. But just then, a bullet hits a helmet on the luggage rack, and Frank instantly seizes the opportunity to counterattack. As a former Special Forces soldier, his shooting skills are even more impressive than his driving. After taking out a whole carload of enemies, only Johnson is left. At this moment, Johnson is chasing Valentina when he suddenly sees Frank behind him. But before Frank can get close to Johnson, his iron bracelet starts to alarm. The signal light has turned orange, meaning he is too far from the car, and if he takes another step forward, he will be instantly unalived. Johnson laughs arrogantly and even taunts Frank, daring him to take one more step. Looking at the villain's ugly face, Frank suddenly turns and runs quickly in the opposite direction. Johnson knows Frank is trying to get back to the car, so he won't give him the chance. He ducks down and immediately uncouples the train car, separating the front and back sections. In Johnson's view, Frank is now completely unable to catch up. Frank climbs onto the roof of the train and gets back into his Audi. He floored the gas and charges forward like an arrow, crashing right into the train car where Johnson is. Johnson is stunned, and as he tries to run, Frank tackles him. Unexpectedly, Johnson has some moves of his own, and in his desperation, he pulls out a dagger to stab Frank. He thinks he is going to win, only to be kicked away by Frank. Frank delivers a heavy punch and kicks the villain onto the hood of the car. He decides to give this scoundrel a special way to die. He ties Johnson's hands to the steering wheel, uses the key to unlock the bracelet on his own wrist, and then puts it on Johnson's wrist. Then he shifts into reverse and backs the car away from the train car. Johnson panics and struggles frantically, finally breaking free from the tape and leaping off the car. Seeing the Audi getting further and further away, he realizes he is doomed. Minister Vasilev, who had just been forced to sign the illegal agreement, receives a phone call. Tarkoni tells him the good news, and he finally breathes a sigh of relief, immediately tearing the agreement to pieces. The villain's plan has ultimately failed. Frank returns to the seaside with his old friend for some leisurely fishing, but this time, they have an extra person with them. Frank can finally enjoy his retirement properly.